On a chilly spring morning, when the mountain air still carried the bite of winter, and the valleys lay hidden beneath veils of mist, a story began to unfold that would grow into one of the most remarkable tales of survival and loyalty ever told. A story not of trained search and rescue animals or well-prepared hikers, but of stray dogs, forgotten, nameless wanderers of the streets and forests, who became the most unlikely heroes, saving strangers who had no reason to expect salvation from such companions. And it is this story, Stray Dog Heroes, How Unlikely Animal Heroes Saved Unknown Hikers, that captured the imagination of the world and still brings chills to those who hear it retold, because at its heart, it reminds us of the raw, unshakable truth that even in the darkest moments, help can come from where we least expect it. It began with three hikers: Anna, a 27-year-old graduate student studying environmental sciences; Lucas, a 32-year-old office worker longing for an escape from routine; and Martina, a 40-year-old nurse who found peace in mountain air, who set off one weekend to explore the lesser-known trails of the Carpathians, their backpacks heavy with supplies, their spirits high, as they followed paths that wound through dense woods, meadows bursting with wildflowers, and narrow ridges offering sweeping views of valleys below, laughing, talking, and savoring the freedom of being far from the city. But the mountains have a way of humbling even the most enthusiastic hikers, and as clouds gathered and the winds shifted, the group found themselves caught in a storm fiercer than any forecast had predicted. Rain lashing down in sheets, thunder rolling through the peaks, trails quickly turning to mud that sucked at their boots with every step, visibility shrinking until they could barely see one another through the driving rain, and in that chaos, they took a wrong turn, a single misstep that carried them off the marked trail and into the wild heart of the forest, where no signs guided them, where the trees closed in so tightly that the storm seemed to echo endlessly between their trunks. By the time the rain slowed, the light had already begun to fade, and exhaustion settled heavily on the hikers, their clothes soaked, their bodies shivering, and their realization dawning with horror. They were lost, far from the safety of lodges or shelters, alone in an unfamiliar wilderness, with night closing in. And though they tried to stay calm, Lucas checking his phone only to find no signal, Anna consulting a map that suddenly seemed useless in the featureless maze of pines. The dread crept in faster than the cold, until the silence of the forest pressed against their ears, broken only by their uneasy breathing. And that was when they first saw him. A scruffy, mud-splattered dog, ribs faintly visible beneath a matted coat, standing at the edge of the clearing, with eyes that gleamed golden in the dim light, watching them with an intensity that made them freeze in place. For a long moment, none of them moved, unsure whether he was a threat or merely a curious stray. But then the dog took a step forward, wagged his tail once, and barked sharply, as if scolding them for standing still in such danger. And then, without waiting for their reaction, he trotted toward a narrow gap in the trees and looked back, barking again, urging them to follow. And though it seemed absurd, Anna felt an instinctive trust, nudging her companions. And together, they trailed behind the dog, stumbling through undergrowth until they reached a dry overhang of rock, where the ground lay sheltered from rain, a crude but life-saving refuge where they could huddle through the night, shielded from the worst of the cold. As they huddled together, the stray curled up beside them, sharing his body warmth, his breathing steady and calm. And when wolves howled faintly in the distance, he lifted his head, ears pricked, growling softly until silence returned. And by dawn, though the hikers were still lost, they no longer felt alone, for they now had a companion who seemed determined to guide them. Over the next 2 days, that stray dog became their protector and leader, finding streams where they could drink, alerting them with sharp barks when they veered towards steep ravines, leading them steadily through the labyrinth of trees. And though hunger gnawed at them, they shared the little food they had with him, grateful beyond words for the sense of hope he gave them, until on the third afternoon, he led them straight into the arms of a search party who had been combing the mountains for missing hikers. The rescuers, stunned when they heard the story of the nameless dog who had saved them. But that was not the only tale, for in another part of the world, a similar miracle unfolded when 2 backpackers in the Andes, college friends chasing adventure during their summer break, found themselves stranded on a snowbound trail after one of them twisted his ankle badly, unable to go further as snow began to fall heavily. Their chances of surviving the night slim, until a stray dog appeared seemingly out of nowhere, bounding through the snow, pressing close against them for warmth, refusing to leave their side. And when morning came, he trotted ahead, leading them slowly but surely down the mountain towards safety, barking until villagers came to investigate. And once again, a life-or-death ordeal ended not because of human planning, but because of an unexpected animal ally. Such stories, repeated in different corners of the world, began to weave into a tapestry of truth too powerful to ignore. That stray dogs, often overlooked, mistreated, or forgotten, possess instincts and loyalty capable of extraordinary heroism, their actions defying logic, proving that the bond between human and dog is not limited to those raised in homes, but is something primal, woven into their very nature. Perhaps the most famous of these stories came from Eastern Europe, where a lost hiker named Jarek spent 4 days in the forest after breaking his arm and losing his way, surviving only because a pack of strays adopted him, sharing scraps of food they scavenged, lying against him at night to stave off hypothermia, and eventually guiding him to a road where passing motorists found him, weak but alive, the dogs vanishing back into the forest as quietly as they had appeared, leaving behind a miracle with no names, only paw prints fading in the mud. And as journalists began to report on these incidents, as social media carried the tales further, people around the world found themselves moved to tears, inspired to look differently at the stray dogs they passed on sidewalks or ignored in alleys, realizing that within those unassuming bodies beat hearts capable of staggering courage and compassion. And experts weighed in, biologists explaining canine instincts for pack survival, psychologists pointing out the deep evolutionary bond between dogs and humans, yet no explanation ever fully captured the mystery of why these animals chose to save strangers, why they risked their own safety to guide, protect, and comfort people who could offer them nothing in return. And that mystery only deepened the awe with which the stories were told. For Anna, Lucas, and Martina, the dog who saved them in the Carpathians remained unnamed, slipping away quietly once they were rescued, as though his task was done, leaving them with gratitude they could never express. But they often said in interviews that they still felt his presence, that whenever they hiked again, they listened for the echo of his bark in the wind, a reminder that sometimes angels come not with wings, but with wagging tails and watchful eyes. And for the countless others whose lives were touched by stray dog heroes, the lesson was the same, that salvation does not always come from the expected sources, that courage can wear a ragged coat and walk on 4 legs, and that in the darkest moments of human vulnerability, the most unlikely of heroes may step forward, unasked and unheralded, to keep us alive, to remind us that we are never truly alone in the wilderness. And so, this story continues to resonate. Told around campfires, in classrooms, on YouTube videos, and news broadcasts, a single, unbroken thread of wonder and gratitude, stretching across thousands of words, yet always returning to one undeniable truth: that the world is richer, kinder, and infinitely more miraculous because of the loyalty of dogs. Even those who have no home, no name, and no reason to love us, except that it is in their nature to do so. And it is for this reason that the legend of stray dog heroes grows every retelling, carrying forward the memory of paw prints that led lost souls home, the warmth of fur against frozen skin, the sound of a bark cutting through despair, and the sight of golden eyes gleaming in the dark, guiding the way back to life.